starting with running back 1, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. We've just discussed him so much as the blue chip guy, the slam dunk guy. Why is that? What is so good about Ashton Jeanty?
So as I said, it's difficult to find flaws in his game. I mean, he has absolutely unreal contact balance. Like, so he's 5'8", 211 pounds. That gives him an absurdly low center of gravity. Again, this is the caveat we throw out anytime we do rankings or comparisons to anything, right? Forget the overall level of the player. Like, we're comping a specific thing, right? So if you hear references to certain players that are like superstars, it's not saying this guy will be as good as that player. It's saying there's something about his game that reminds me of the other player we're talking about. So Ashton Jeanty, right? Number one, he had the best college season since Barry Sanders. But Barry Sanders was also built like that, right? Extremely low to the ground. Sanders is like 5'8" and 205, 206, something like that. And part of the reason Barry Sanders was so hard to tackle, in addition to being like one of the most elusive players to ever play the game, was the dude who's built so low to the ground. So, think of those highlight reels of like an entire group of the Bears defense converging around him and just like bouncing off. Like when they're so compact and so low to the ground, they are extremely difficult to tackle. He also has this incredible style where he just makes it look easier than anyone I can think of. It just, nothing looks hard. Nothing looks like he's putting effort into it. It's just like he glides from one thing to the next. Guy bounces off and it's like, oh, look, here's a crease. Off he goes. It's really impressive. Like, the numbers are obviously insane, like video game numbers. Over 4,700 yards in 3 seasons, 6.4 yards per attempt in his career, 6.9 last year, 5.25 yards after contact per attempt, right? So he's averaging over 5 yards per carry after contact last year, 150 something broken tackles on 375 attempts. To me, like, the only concern, red flag, whatever you want to put it, is those volume numbers, right? 375 attempts on its own is pretty insane. 748 attempts in college. He's had a lot of work, and that at a position where we know that generally speaking, that's a thing, wasn't a thing for Derrick Henry ever, but usually there's some real signal in the volume of workload that a guy has had at some point becomes a problem. Ashton Jeanty's had a lot of work already.
That's exactly what I wrote down as a potential concern. 375 carries that you mentioned, 388, including negated plays. It's 40 more than anybody we've seen, in recent years. And so there's not like a previous comp. Show me all the guys with 380 plus carries and how they've translated it in a season. Go ahead.
And also, just quickly, like that, it's also not only is it a huge number period, right? But it's also above, remember those sort of thresholds that people used to have in the NFL? Once a guy's hit this amount of work in a single season, next year is like a drop off a cliff, right? Now, it's obviously different going from college to the NFL, but it is notable at least that Jeanty's season last year, independent of like the overall cumulative volume, just last year, his season sort of past the thresholds that used to be like, if a running back ever gets those carries in the NFL, next season is almost the inevitable start of his career decline.
Yeah, I don't know if I always trust what those studies were doing. They felt a little overfit, but the studies were essentially, I think it was Football Outsiders came up with like a magic number for them was like 383 carries, because very specifically, if you had that many, it was like Larry Johnson with Kansas City. Maybe DeMarco Murray hit it one year. There was another name I just had, and I can't remember who it was. But once guys got over that threshold, the next year wasn't as good, and maybe even subsequent years. It is really the only thing. Plus, but it's also his style, too. I mean, when you look at the numbers per PFF, 150 missed tackles forced, it does look like a misprint, right? We're a few years removed. I think David Montgomery was right around 100 or pushing 100. We're like, wow, this guy's incredible. Jeanty's numbers all look fake. Attempts, yards, missed tackles forced, it all looks completely fake.
Yeah, like I said, they're video game numbers. They are it's the best sort of statistical output since that Barry Sanders season where the numbers do genuinely look fake. Like if you showed somebody that Barry Sanders season now with no context and said, did this happen or not? You'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course, he didn't average, 250 yards a game or whatever it was. That's absurd. but like Jeanty, number one, did it. Number two, the Montgomery comp is interesting because they have similarities in terms of Jeanty at 5'8", 211 pounds is extremely difficult to get that clean shot on, right? Compact, small, low to the ground, incredibly skillful, makes those like really subtle, quick movements before getting hit just to avoid getting, again, Sanders, again, same thing. Like, it was so hard to get a clean shot on Barry Sanders. There were 300-pound, Leviathans on the defensive line that were just like, if I can get one shot at him, I can stop him, right? And you're like, you're never going to get it. You're never, ever going to get that shot on Barry Sanders. Jeanty's the same thing. It's so hard to get the clean hit on him. So, 375 carries or whatever. How many of those, are they the same, right? 375 carries for him versus 375 carries for a Larry Johnson or a DeMarco Murray, guys that carried the ball very differently. I wonder what the sort of cumulative punishment is for his body relative to those guys.
No, I think it's a fair point, Sam. And Drake in the chat knew you were going to say that. He was reciting the same thing, right? He does a fantastic job of not letting defenders get that clean shot. I think his footwork is fantastic to be able to do that. I think he's good at contorting his body to make sure that you're not getting a clean shot at him. Like, there's different ways of forcing 150 missed tackles, right? Just to repeat those who don't listen, we're not saying he is exactly like Barry Sanders and or will have the same career as Barry Sanders. You were comparing his low center of gravity.
Right.
It's not even the same stratosphere as Barry cutting and juking, right? Like, the movement is nothing like Barry Sanders. The comps for me for Ashton Jeanty were the Maurice Jones-Drew, Nick Chubb spectrum, just because I used those two as comps before. I thought Nick Chubb was a bigger version of Maurice Jones-Drew, the way dudes bounced off of him, but with some better big play ability. I think Jeanty has some of that Nick Chubb ability to and this is the comp for me, right? This is what I'm comparing. Nick Chubb for me is really good when there's not good run blocking. He could still get 2 to 4 yards. When there is good run blocking, he could take it to the house, right? Yeah. We've always described Saquon Barkley as, when the blocking's not there, he has a lot of 0-1 yard gains, right? Whereas Nick Chubb would turn those into 2, 3, or 4. But if you give Saquon a crease, he takes it to the house. I think Ashton Jeanty's closer to Nick Chubb, where you could still just, on a bad day, say Penn State, you could still find some yards, right? You're going to have, Penn State was absurd. 8-man box, dominating up front. Not saying Jeanty even was great in that game, but he at least found some yards that probably shouldn't even have been there. So I think he could do that, and if you give him a crease, he has the chance to take it to the house, much like a Nick Chubb. Hey, guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now.
Yeah, the way he plays, you sort of imagine a player that's always trying to bounce it outside, trying to make the play, but he is actually very good at just lowering his head and getting 3 to 5 yards if that's what's available, right? And he finishes runs very well. Like, even when the play is definitely ending at this point, he's going to get another 3 to 5 yards just from strength, just determination, just keeping going. He actually is very good at that. Like, this is what's available, get it, and don't get it, and nothing else is on the table. In a way that I think you assume automatically he probably isn't, because of the way that he is very good at kind of cutting and making guys miss and, getting extra yardage that way. I think he is actually pretty good at being efficient in it as well.
And much like Chubb or whoever, I think he's fine in the pass game. I think I'll at least touch on every running back in some level of what they do in the pass game. I think if you just ask Jeanty to run normal running back routes, he'll be fine. I don't know that he'll be the mismatch creator, lining him up all over the formation.
Yeah, I think he can catch. Like, they didn't ask him to do much of it, but there's a play against Oregon, say, and strength of competition is another thing worth at least bringing up for Jeanty, right? Did it at Boise State the whole way, so there are strength of competition concerns, or at least it's relevant, right? But you already mentioned the Penn State game, which is a step up in competition against one of the best teams in the country. Oregon, for most of last season, were like number 1 in the country, right? Arguably the best team. Against Oregon, there's a play where he split out wide, goes up over a guy one-on-one down the sideline, like Saquon Barkley has been able to do in his NFL career. So, I think he can be a factor in the pass game, definitely. I agree. He's not, He's not going to be Christian McCaffrey. He's not going to be that type of running back, but most people aren't. But I think he's more than serviceable as a receiving running back. Pass pro, I think maybe an arguable weakness of him as well, but that's like basically every running back except Travion Henderson. Pass pro is a relative weakness. So I wouldn't, put it out there as a problem, right? But I think it's given what is an almost complete and almost, outstanding, if you put it on a spider chart, right? Like here's all the areas where Ashton Jeanty is amazing. Pass pro would be one of the weakest areas in the spider chart, but the spider chart overall would be, like a circle.
Last thing I want to mention about Jeanty, because again, I think there are those slight concerns, maybe a little pass pro competition issues, right? For whatever that is, I think he solved those necessary, for the most part. The workload thing. I want to talk about the Penn State game really quick, and then just his vision. But Penn State game, you could say, well, they bottled him up, something like 3 yards per carry, whatever it was. He forced like 15 missed tackles in there. And when you watch the film, there was nowhere to run. When there was a little crease to run, he got his 8, 10, 12, whatever it was. Penn State did everything that they could on the chalkboard to stop him, but also they just destroyed blocks. I mean, they have a very good defensive front. They have some guys who are going to get drafted pretty high next year on that defensive line. Penn State did everything they could in the college football playoff to slow down Ashton Jeanty. So I think that's where any running back is like that. If the entire defense decides and wins up front, and we're going to stop this guy, they'll be able to do that. So I'm not going to use that as a knock. But I just want to touch on his vision really quick. I think that's one of the other things that separates him, right? He's tough to tackle. He's definitely tough to tackle if you're even half engaged with an offensive lineman, right? You're just not going to arm tackle Ashton Jeanty all that well. But he's got a really good feel too for when to cut back, for when to bounce outside. He's got a good feel, and I think he could do it across any scheme. He could run downhill duo type plays where you bounce it out, make a big play against a corner. He can run power counter, set up his pullers, and he can run zone where that's a pure vision downhill cut play. I think Jeanty can do it all, which is why he's RB1.
Yeah, the Penn State game, I think, is just a cautionary tale of, remember, running backs are still susceptible or dependent on the blocking in front of them, right? And this is why, how high can we draft a running back? Can we take him at 4, 5, 6? That, to me, that's less of a question than how good is the situation he's stepping into, right? Do you have an offensive line? Do you have a run game already and you just need somebody to come in and maximize it? Or are you asking this guy to come in and effectively replace an offensive line? Like, are you drafting him in lieu of fixing an offensive line that's a problem? If that's the answer, don't draft him, because he can't, like, that shows you running backs are still, like, he'll get yardage and he'll make guys miss and he'll be, productive, but it won't fix it. It won't, you can't invalidate that. Like the Penn State thing, as good as Ashton Jeanty is, he can break 7 tackles on a play, and that play went for like 4 yards or whatever it was, right? You can't replace blocking. If the blocking is overmatched, the guy will not fix the run game, even if he's amazing. You need to have that somewhat in place already. But I think for so the Patriots, right? The Patriots should not draft Ashton Jeanty, regardless of how good they think he is. If they think he's the best player in the draft, they should not draft Ashton Jeanty, because they do not have the situation in place for him to succeed there. Chicago, though, right, who just spent an offseason so far overhauling an offensive line, I think you can start to make an argument then. And I think a lot of the teams that are theoretically in the Jeanty market actually have the offensive line, the blocking in place for him to do well.
I see the chat debating, how do you have vision as a shorter running back? It is, and I like one of the explanations, it is feel. It's reading the blocks. It's not necessarily, you're not too short to see the blocking scheme up front.
I mean, you're not seeing over people when you're running back vision.
But you're reading your blockers in leverage, right? When I started, as you get down the running back list, when I start to put knocks on running backs, it's when they start to bounce outside too soon, right? And then you start to, we'll talk about that later. It's about reading your blockers and knowing when to cut, when to bounce out, when to, cut off the hip of a puller, whatever it might be. Jeanty has a good feel. You could call it vision, you call it feel, whatever it is. He's making the right cuts and getting to the right place more often than not.
It's different. Like, quarterbacks need to see over the line to see receivers 25 yards downfield, right? Every running back in the NFL is shorter than the offensive line in front of them. That's not like how running back vision works. It's, as you say, it's figuring out, like, if you've ever weaved through a crowd, just foot traffic, if you Fremont Street, right? I got to get from the one end of Fremont Street to the other, like head down, let's go. It's about understanding the movement of people and figuring out when the gaps are going to open up and like how to go. That's running back vision.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.